Hi everyone, my name's Richie Weldon. I'm a program manager on the Portals and Publishing team. That's just a fancy way of saying that I'm the guy you want to come talk to if you have questions or concerns or want to know how to use our web parts. I'm going to be over at the SharePoint booth later today, tomorrow, and on Thursday, so I'd love to see you. What we're going to talk about today is how to transform your internal communications using SharePoint News. We're going to go through a set of demos, but before we get into that, John's going to go over the topics to make sure that those demos really hit home.
All right, thanks, Richie. So I'm John Sanders. For the last 2 years, I've been a program manager in the SharePoint team. It's been my privilege to help modernize our classic web parts and pages into a much more modern, easier to use stack. So with that, I've more recently taken on our news, and let's see what we're talking about here. Essentially, what we're talking about is the modern intranet. And how do we make dynamic, rich content that you can access across your organization that's personalized, so it's correct for you, it's correct for the audiences that you target it for. It's social, right? Now, you might laugh a little bit from the previous SharePoint social efforts, but what I would say is, in our modern day, we expect content to be social. I need to be able to like it, comment on it, maybe mention it. And then I also need it to be actionable. So it's not just about finding content, it's about making sure that I'm effective and I can use it to effectively target the right people for that content. And ultimately what that boils down to is modern employee communications. So with SharePoint News, you can transform your team and your organization into a different way to work by allowing you to build beautiful, rich, dynamic content and pages that tell your story, that gets your message out to the right people. So let's go through and look at how SharePoint News helps you with that. Ultimately, what News is a content distribution service. And that service lives on top of and depends on modern pages and parts. We get to take advantage of all of the beautiful pages and authoring experiences that we've built over the last 2 years, as well as all those rich dynamic web parts that help you tell the story you want to tell. In addition, more recently, we've built a number of the more classic publishing features into that modern pages and publishing stack, and News gets to take advantage of that too. So some simple examples would be basically content approvals, audience targeting, flexible and reusable page designs. You might have noticed that in Jeff's demo yesterday. Also tomorrow at 9 a.m., we're gonna spend some time on stage and build a bunch of portals, so that might be a good place to see modern page designs. Metadata, and then much more extensive branding. So News works across all of your modern sites, whether it's a team site, a communication site, or a hub rolling up content across various sites for maybe a department level or a regional level. And what it helps you do is extend the reach of your content. Now, some people, us included, don't always work in SharePoint. I spend a bunch of my time in Teams. We know that. We've got SharePoint powering many of the services behind Teams, and a simple example of that is News. So with News, in 2 different ways, you can work in Teams. So the first one is, once you create a piece of content, you can easily pin it as a tab in any channel in News. So if you need people to see what are the standard policies and procedures, or what's the latest status, or maybe here at Ignite, I've been spending a bunch of time with customers, so I like to do a little prep sheet on understand their usage in SharePoint and their environment. So I pin that content to a tab in News. And then as well, we can use the News connector to push all news posts from your team into the place where people are working. So you're working in Teams, I post a piece of news in your team site, you actually automatically get notified about it in your team channel where you're working. So when I think about News, I think about a durable way to create and share knowledge. But recently, let's talk about a couple of new features we've added. So we showed off also in Jeff's demo yesterday a service called News Link. That's available to you now in targeted release. And the reason we built it is we know that a bunch of your content isn't necessarily brand new that you want to create a page about. So you might have a great classic page or a classic news publishing system you've already been using for a few years. You can take that content and push it into the modern news system, and you'll get that content distribution, that audience targeting, and the smarts of the graph to make sure that people that you work with see it. And then the other way this works really well is sometimes executives, Satya is a perfect example, doesn't actually post things inside the company very often. He often publishes publicly on LinkedIn. So we can take that content, we post it as a news link, it gets pushed into our news distribution system. And then the next new feature we also showed off yesterday is organizational news. So you can essentially identify a particular site as an authoritative source of news in your organization. Now, even though I might work with particular people and the graph helps me find news from them, in my personalized news feed, I actually see authoritative news from my company interweaved into that feed, both on mobile and in SharePoint Home. And with that, I'm going to let Richie show us a bunch of cool stuff.
Thanks, John. The first page I'm going to show you here when it pops up on the screen is our Asia Pacific region site. This is a modern page with modern web parts on here to really help get your message across in a very beautiful way. You can see the image web part that we have at the top of the page here. It's in a full width section, and it's including one of our new features, which is text overlay on top of images. Below that, we have a news web part set in a side-by-side layout showing about 4 news posts. We'll come back to this in a moment. I want to first show you a little bit more. Here's another one of our new features. This is 3 images set in a section with background set to a strong value. And what I really like about this is it frames the images beautifully and makes them pop off of the screen. Below the images, we also have the ability to show events from across your company. And we also have quick links here showing one of our 4 new layouts, including icons next to them to help convey information and context about what those quick links might be if the user is going to click on one. As I go back to the news web part that I glossed over really quickly there, I'm going to show you what happens if we go to edit mode on this page. So we go to edit mode and I bring up, there we go, and I bring up the property pane for the news web part. You can see that we have the ability to choose different sources for our news content. In this case, I'm going to select specific sites that I want to show news content from. First, I'm going to select the Asia Pacific region. You can see how the news web part was updating automatically. I'm going to search for one by using the search box. In this case, I'm going to find work at Contoso Hub. And then I'm going to press the show more link and select, if I can find it, there it is, news at Contoso. John mentioned earlier that we have the ability to visually distinguish news content from your authoritative news site using the badges. And you can see this right here on the bottom 2 news posts. Hopefully this draws attention to the page viewer and makes them want to click on those news items. As I collapse the news source a little bit, I'm going to show a couple different layouts here for the news web part. We're going to get to carousel in a moment, but for right now, I'm going to select on Hub News. As I do that, you can see that the web part is updated. And I want to show a new, really powerful feature that we have called Select News to Organize. When you select News to Organize, you get a dialog that pops up that lets you pick and place the news content that you want and in the order in which you want it to be displayed. You can easily do this by dragging and dropping content from the left side of this dialog onto the right. I'm going to do a couple more of these here. As you can see, it's being updated pretty much in real time there. And if you don't like the order in which you have these, you can just easily drag and drop them on the right part of the dialog. As I close this dialog, I can see on the property pane that I have one more chance to make sure that the news is in the right order that I want. I can, just as on the other dialog, I can drag and drop them into the new locations. You can also see the badges again on this web part, which is awesome. It's drawing attention to those news posts. Now I'm going to switch to a different news post or a different site here. And this should have been SharePoint News. There we go. I wanted to show off SharePoint Home. SharePoint Home, as you all know, you probably have used this a little bit. It's a site where you can see news from across your organization personalized to you, complete with the organizational badge again. Now, John did mention that we have the ability to set a site as the authoritative news source for your organization, and we have selected News at Contoso just for this specific occasion. Any news post that's added here will get those badges, which is great, and it will help just draw attention to those news posts. On this site, you can see that we have the carousel news layout for carousel layout for the news web part, and it's going through auto cycling, and we have this set up. Oh, that's one thing I forgot to show you. Let's go back. On the carousel layout, okay, you have the ability to pick the number of news items that you want to show in the carousel display, and you can also turn on to the ability to auto cycle through the various news posts that you've added there. In this case, I have auto cycle turned on, and it's set to change every 5 seconds. It might be a little bit too slow for some people, so I'm going to increase that to switch every 2 seconds. We also have the ability to hide the title and commands to remove some part of the Chrome around that web part to make the carousel layout for news stand out a little bit more. As we go back to the News at Contoso site, you can see the carousels auto-cycling through everything. And we also have a couple other news web parts set up on this page to categorize news a little bit better for your page viewers. As I scroll through this page, you can see that we also have company events and also information coming in from our company Twitter feed, all right here in one location. The next site I'm going to show you is the sales site. Now this is a hub site. As you might know, hub sites are a great location to take news and information from associated sites and have them bubble on up to various web parts. Okay? This used to be it.
Refresh.
Refresh. Let's see what happens here. Gotta love live demos. Okay, well, this was a hub site that would have shown information being bubbled up. I think John's going to help me here for a moment.
Refresh again.
Refresh it one more time. No dice. Maybe, maybe not. Okay. If you stop by the SharePoint booth later today, I'd be glad to try to figure out this situation and show you this part. Instead, let me switch over to Teams. John mentioned that we have the ability now to show news posts inside of Teams that allows content to get to your colleagues wherever they're working. So as you can see here, we have a number of SharePoint news posts added. And if you want to read that content, you just have to click on it, and it will load up in another page. This allows your teams to remain in the same configuration as you had it before, so you don't lose that context of what you were doing. Now, let's say that you have a really important piece of content that you want to make more durable for your users, and you want to have it always displayed and readily available for them. You can use the SharePoint News connector to do that. First, I clicked on the plus button along the top tab there for Teams. Now I'm going to select SharePoint here, and I'm going to find the page that I want to pin into my Teams channel. This is the regional cost and summary analysis. As I click Save, we're going to hopefully see, there it is, the page showing up inside of Teams. Now anytime that you're in your conversations and you want to refer to that content again, all you have to do is click on the tab and it's going to load for you. And again, this is just another modern page showing web parts looking beautiful. One thing I haven't shown you yet is actually publishing a news post. So let me switch over to another page that I have all queued up. This is our September monthly customer updates. So we can see that we have the new title region here, which is a new feature. Really love it. We have 4 different layouts now for title region. This one is called color block. Excuse me, it's called color block. We also have the ability to show the author information for who is publishing this article. As I scroll through, you can see that we have pull quote here, which is highlighting some information about our sales. We have quick charts and some more text information being displayed. I'm going to click on dismiss all so you can actually see the button, maybe. Okay, right behind it, we have the ability, there it is, the button for post news. And as I do that, I think John just got a notification on his mobile device.
All right, so let's switch over to mobile. See if with our wonderful Wi-Fi here, we have a notification already, or if we might have to wait for a second. So I'm gonna actually show you both mobile apps, so a little bit different on Android than iOS. So as I talked about earlier about bringing and reusing existing content, well, maybe you'll only get to see iOS. Okay, well, we'll start with iOS then. So one of the things that we talked about earlier, right, with organizational news, and with the idea that that's distributed to all people, if you come into the mobile app, this is our iOS app, you might have seen the demo yesterday. You can obviously download this app now, both on iOS and on Android. If you switch over to the News tab, we've added the ability here to not only show what used to be available, which was personalized news to you, right? So these are people that you work with in your graph or sites you follow. This is news from those sites. We've also interspersed company news, and we use whatever site you've designated earlier. We show it here, and then you get this badging or visual differentiation so that you can have a consistent story to reach all of your employees. And as I showed from the screenshot earlier, or here on the mobile device, we've got that interspersed into your personalized news. And we'll give Android one chance here to show up. Maybe we'll even try switching adapters, because that's always fun, right? And if that doesn't work, we'll just switch to questions. Hey, what do you know, my pop? All right, so with the new adapter, we've got our Android app here. One of the abilities we talked about was reusing existing content. So for me, one of the things I'm very proud about working at Microsoft is our ability and focus to make sure that we have all of our content and services very accessible. So recently, Wired recognized us as focusing quite a bit on that accessibility. So I'm gonna take this content and I'm going to share it out to SharePoint. So this is a new capability. It's available on Android, rolling out to targeted release now. When I do that, I'm going to pull specific information, the same information you saw in my screenshot earlier from that article. Then I can move through and pick what site I want to publish that to. So I'm going to choose the Asia Pacific region. I'll post that news. If I come back and we drill into the Asia Pacific region, and then we go look at news, oh, a little bit of a demo fail. All right. It works. Been using it for quite a while. And with that said, let's switch back, and I'm going to leave up some use cases by department of news. This is something we put together with our content publishing team. And I will take a couple of questions if anyone has them. Otherwise, I will put up the please remember and evaluate us slide. Questions? Okay.
The text overlay, is that available? Because I don't see that in my current environment.
Sure, so the question was, text overlay, is that available today? So that's a function of the image web part. So when you add an image today, you can go to the property pane and flip a toggle that says, I want to put image, or I want to put text above it. You'll get that black box. You can then type in that text. You can also add a link so that now that image becomes a hyperlink. With that, I will flip over to session evaluation. I'm happy to take other questions. We haven't gotten the rake yet. Anybody else? Yeah, a couple of questions. You have to be kind of loud.
Available with these features? What versions of SharePoint?
So we start always on SharePoint Online, and then we have some of our capabilities. Most of the modern pages and web parts we showed you are on 2019, and then the underlying framework is available on 2016. Yeah.
So we have a lot of technical bloggers at our company. They're asking us what the best practice is for like a web part for posting like code snippets or blocks of code.
Okay, you will be very happy. We are showing off here. We actually just added a code web part that respects languages, shows it correctly styled on the page.
Awesome.
Yeah. Any other questions? One more. All right. Then we'll get the hook.
Got a question about categorizing or metadata tagging
Sure.
individual items. Can that be reflected in the news digest that gets sent out? So you have a section on corporate news, section on something else.
Yeah, great question. So today metadata can be applied at the site level. So you could choose to add, let's say, 1, 2, 3 columns and various categories on it. Within the news web part, you can filter, sorry about that, you can filter on those categories and display news based on that category. So you could add multiple news web parts, and then in the title of that web part, say, this is news from the executive corner. That's basically what we did on our News at Contoso site. We pulled a bunch of different content filtered by different categories on that homepage.
But that doesn't generate the News Digest email.
It does not yet generate the News Digest email. Great question. That's a manual process today. We have worked on internally the idea of an automated News Digest, and then the question is sort of what are the right knobs and dials to give you to tune that digest. And I think with that, I have to jump off, but I will be over here and answer questions if you want, or at the SharePoint booth later. Thanks, everyone.